Our guest today is the Cook County State's Attorney. She's the county's first female state's attorney and first Hispanic state's attorney. Our guest today is a career prosecutor and a lifelong Chicagoan who was born and raised in the Pilsen neighborhood. She earned her undergraduate degree from Loyola University and her law degree from Chicago-Kent College of Law. Our guest today is married to Dr. James Gomez. She and her husband are the proud parents of 4 children. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the City Club of Chicago, Cook County State's Attorney, Anita Alvarez. Anita?
Thanks, Jay. Good afternoon. Thank you all for taking time out for your busy schedules to join us here today. I know it's kind of easy to get people to Maggiano's, isn't it? Because the food's so good. The only thing is, my stomach is kind of nervous, so I couldn't really eat what I would normally eat when I come here. I was a guest here at the City Club several times during the campaign, but this is my first official appearance here as the State's Attorney of Cook County. And it seems hard to believe that next month will mark a 1-year anniversary of my election as Cook County State's Attorney. The time really has seemed to have flown by. There are lots of words that come to mind to describe what this first year has been like, but 2 probably stand out, and that's exciting and exhausting at the same time. It's, to be honest, settling into the public life and the public role of Cook County State's Attorney it's a bit of an adjustment for me, both personally and professionally. For example, it's taken some time for me to get used to having my name featured prominently on nearly every lawsuit and legal document filed in Cook County. And prior to becoming state's attorney, I'd never been sued before, but now that has changed, and my name has appeared on several lawsuits, unfortunately. And those of us who are lawyers in the room know that that's kind of uneasy to have your name. But I am now very active, though, and will continue to be. And the other thing, which of course I really don't understand, is that I do now have a social network. I apparently have a Facebook page, which my son and his college buddies all know about and think it's pretty cool. And of course I am still challenged when it comes to computers, and I can barely open my emails. But there is a Facebook page, and if that isn't exciting enough, the Cook County State's Attorney's Office recently has broken new ground on primetime television. Yes, if you haven't seen it, you should all be aware that there is a CBS primetime series that is loosely I say, based on the State's Attorney's Office. Apparently in the new show, which of course I haven't seen because I don't have time to watch, involves a sex and corruption scandal, and the state's attorney, I must point out that he is a male, does go to jail. And it's worth noting that they never identify whether he's a Republican or a Democrat in that show, but I guess we can draw our own conclusions. I have not watched the show, but it is, you have to wonder, how did this guy have enough time for a big sex and corruption scandal? Because I don't know how he could fit that in to this crazy schedule that I have. And it is interesting that our office would be featured and catch the attention of Hollywood producers. But I just want to assure you that we have no intention of living up to all of that drama. And besides being a hockey mom, a soccer mom, I think I'd probably be pretty boring by Hollywood standards, and that's just okay with me, because I am quite happy where I'm at and happy having this job. I love it. I really do. So I continue to have the passion and the energy for this office that I had when I chose to run, and throughout my entire career, 23 years now with the Cook County State's Attorney's Office. And you are aware that our office is the 2nd largest in the nation. We have nearly 900 assistant state's attorneys. We are larger than a lot of law firms here in the city of Chicago. And we have many important powers, many important responsibilities within the criminal justice system. But first and foremost, we are the voice of the victims of crime here in Cook County, and that's something we can never forget. And as I stated throughout my campaign for state's attorney, I had ideas and I had some plans within the office, and I'm happy to say that this past year we have really done a lot to make those changes in very positive ways. During my campaign, right here on this stage, I was criticized by opponents and some of the media as being nothing more than a status quo candidate because I had been in the office so long. And some of those critics predicted that I would be reluctant to make any changes within the state's attorney's office because of my career there. And I'm here to tell you that those critics were wrong. The state's attorney's office has seen more changes in this past year than it has in a very, very long time. And my first task was to put together a new management team, and I had made changes in the leadership of our office in 9 out of the 10 major bureaus. I promoted many talented people from within the office and brought in new talent from outside as well. And I talked a lot about diversity within the state's attorney's office during my campaign, and I have had the opportunity to promote a number of highly qualified women and minorities to management and mid-management positions within my office, and I'm very, very proud of that. For the first time in the history of this office, our largest bureau, the Criminal Bureau, over 500 assistants in that bureau, is managed by Shauna Bolliker, the first woman to ever manage the Criminal Bureau as my bureau chief there. And our major and main responsibility always remains to prosecute violent crime. And the responsibility, along with that responsibility, keeps us very busy here in the city. Consider that in the month of September alone, we lost 9 Chicago public school students to violence. And my office will vigorously prosecute the offenders who have been arrested in those particular crimes. But it's clear to me that the greatest challenge that we face in law enforcement and in this unrelenting wave of violence, particularly it's gun violence. I do believe that in large measure this problem stems from organized gang activity and drug trade here in Cook County. We've seen our gangs get very sophisticated within the drug trade. It is a business. And in our gang and narcotics units, we have worked closely and will continue to work closely with the Chicago Police Department to crack down on the most violent gang members who continue to harass and endanger the citizens of Cook County. We have implemented a new program. That program is the Target Repeat Offender Apprehension and Prosecutions Program, better known as TRAP. And this program identifies the 10 most problematic offenders in the 10 most violent districts in Chicago. And we have designated an assistant state's attorney in each of those districts to work with police on these particular cases and focus on the cases and the effect that they have on those communities. My office is also currently in the process of working to pass new gun legislation that will help us target and crack down on gun-related and gang violence. We have drafted legislation that would increase criminal penalties for gang members who are arrested by police on the streets in possession of loaded weapons. These offenders would no longer be eligible for probation under this proposed legislation. Unfortunately, the gun bill failed to pass in the Illinois legislature when we introduced it last spring, but there is good news to report. We reintroduced that bill just last week in the veto session, and it was passed overwhelmingly in the House of Representatives. Next week, I will be traveling to Springfield to seek additional support for this measure in the state Senate. I really do consider this and other measures we are supporting to be common sense gun legislation. I'm hopeful and optimistic that our efforts will be successful down in Springfield. When we see the level of violence that we have all witnessed on city streets, particularly the savage murder and beating of Fenger student Darian Albert, I think it reminds us all that the problem is so much larger and complex, much deeper, particularly in many communities. The violence is fueled by so many factors, economic factors such as joblessness, factors such as drug addiction, domestic violence, physical and sexual abuse. In the face of such dramatic problems, there certainly is no easy solution. Latino on Latino violence and black on black crime is not a new phenomenon in the city of Chicago or across the nation. And now we're seeing all this media attention, but it is not a new phenomenon. Many years ago, when I was prosecuting gang-related homicides at 26th and Cal, the vast majority of the cases involved were Latino on Latino youth and black on black crime. These members, young gang members, shooting each other for nothing, for senseless, stupid reasons, and many times getting innocent people caught in that crossfire. And when we now have cell phones and video cameras, and this dreadful phenomenon has not changed. It is still there. And if you walk through the courts at 26 in California, you would observe the same pattern. As a minority assistant state's attorney, many times I was questioned and criticized for being on the prosecutor's side, and how could I do that, and how could I sell out my community. And one particular murder case really occurred literally a half a block down the alley from my house. I never told anyone involved in the case that I knew exactly where everything was, because I lived a half a block away. And when one of the offenders, one of the witnesses, said to me, how could you do this? You're supposed to be defending. Why are you prosecuting? And I said to him, look at my victim. My victim is from my community as well. And that is unfortunately the seriousness that we see every day. It's sad, it's frustrating, it's a reality, and it's clear to me that there's no easy solution. It can't be achieved by one new state's attorney, one mayor, one police superintendent. It can't. We need people like you. We need the business community. We need educators. We need community-based organizations and the clergy. Sponsor an after-school program, sponsor a soccer team, a baseball team, whatever it might be, and give these kids something to do after school. But no more than anything else, we need parents to take responsibility for their children. Jody Weiss recently said, parents, you don't need a search warrant to check your kids' rooms, and that's so true. So we need parents and guardians to take more responsibility, to make it their business to know where their kids are each and every day, what they're up to, and where they are after curfew. But we are working very hard in the state's attorney's office to address the violence issues. And one of the ways we're doing that is reestablishing our community prosecutions offices. I've changed the name to Community Justice Centers. And these local offices, we've opened two now. And I made that promise during my campaign, because I felt it's very important for us in law enforcement in the state's attorney's office to work to restore the concept of these particular offices, because it's needed in the community. We need to do our part in reestablishing that trust in law enforcement, which is lost in many times. So I opened two new community justice centers, one on the north side and one on the south side. And we're planning currently to open one in Oak Park. That'll be our third office. And these offices, I'm proud to say, through some restructuring in the office, we were able to get them up and running without asking for any more money from the county board. And the purpose of these offices is to address the quality of life issues, vertical prosecutions. Our ASAs handle these cases from the beginning to the end, which is wonderful because it really provides some continuity for the victims in these cases. We work closely with the CAPS program, with local community groups, and I can tell you that the phone hasn't stopped ringing, particularly on the South Side office. Our ASAs are working hard each and every day in those community prosecutions offices. Another issue that came up repeatedly during the campaign was public corruption and the fight to battle the problem at the state and the local level. I consider this to be an extremely important issue, and I don't think it could be more of a priority for us here in Illinois, given the high-profile political scandals our citizens unfortunately have been subjected to. I was proud to have been the only elected official to be on Governor Quinn's Reform Commission. While it involved a great deal of time, it really did, I think the commission gave us a solid blueprint and some great recommendations for bringing reform to government and politics on many, many levels. Within my office, I have also been working hard to address this issue. At the outset of my administration, I hired a veteran federal prosecutor to lead our Special Prosecutions Bureau, and that is the bureau that handles those types of cases with corruption issues. And we are already taking a more aggressive approach to public and government corruption cases. Equally as important, we are working very hard to forge ahead and enhance relationship with federal law enforcement and local inspector general's office. We work hand in hand with the U.S. Attorney's Office on many occasions on very important and complex matters. The feds always do have more resources than us, so it's nice when we're able to do something jointly together. Last spring, my administration drafted and pursued passage of an anti-corruption legislation that would have provided local prosecutors with the same legal tools enjoyed by the feds and the majority of states throughout the nation when it comes to public corruption investigations. We are in the dark ages here in Illinois, and in fact, I would think that Pat Fitzgerald couldn't do half of what he does if he was stuck with the laws, the state laws that we have. The legislation would have updated existing consensual overhear laws and enacted a comprehensive RICO statute at the state level to help us more effectively target corruption and criminal enterprises such as street gangs and human trafficking rings. That particular piece of legislation, in addition to corruption issues, it truly would have helped us on our gang-related cases, because every day we see, with the gang cases, it's one thing to arrest the foot soldier on the street, but the guy who's actually calling the shots, the one that doesn't live in Englewood, the one that's living out in Orland in a big house with the 2 Tahoes in the driveway, it's kind of hard to get to him because they've created ways to shield themselves away. And this particular statute would have helped us kind of go up that chain. It would have helped us in fact, merge some different cases together. But unfortunately, and maybe not surprisingly, state legislators failed to approve these measures last session. But we have no intention of letting go, and we have no intention of stopping this legislation. We will revisit these proposals in the legislature in the hopes that we can reach some consensus that will make our investigations of corruption at the state level much more effective. During the campaign, I also promised the establishment of a dedicated special prosecutions unit that would combat a growing problem of mortgage fraud. We have seen an increase in these cases, particularly when it comes to seniors being the victims. Given our Cook County's budget and financial problems, it was clear that there would be no monies available at the local level to fund such an expansion. So we drafted a proposal and sought federal stimulus monies. Last month, we received great news because our office has been awarded a $2.3 million grant to create a dedicated mortgage fraud investigation and prosecutions unit. So I look forward to working on these issues and to going forward, and also to have dedicated assistant state's attorneys who will be focusing on just those mortgage fraud issues. And I believe that it's something that's really needed, and I'm just happy to have the opportunity to get that money, to get this going and get it up and running. And we're going to be focusing on those who have abused the lending process and helping Cook County residents who have been victimized by this rampant mortgage fraud. The month of October marks National Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and here in Cook County we consider our efforts not only to prosecute but also to raise awareness about this particular crime. Over the course of just 1 month this past summer, 6 women were slain as a result of intimate partner homicides in Cook County. The names of these victims faded quickly from public attention, but their personal tragedies involving intimate partner abuse remind us of this alarming crime that all too often lurks in the shadows of communities until it's way too late. And that's why we have expanded our efforts to work in the community and get out the word about domestic violence. As I see it, the greatest challenge that I face as state's attorney when it comes to domestic violence is to develop an approach in which we measure our success not just by our conviction rates, but also by how we assist our victims and work to stop the cycle of violence. It's a tall order and certainly not something we can achieve in isolation. And that's why we've expanded our efforts to work with community-based agencies and advocacy groups to help provide our victims not only with effective prosecution, but also with access to full range of services that best suits their individual needs. Our increased partnership with the Chicago Police Department is paying big dividends in domestic violence court. For the first time in the history of domestic violence prosecutions, Chicago Police have assigned a full-time detective to work with our assistant state's attorneys in screening cases for felony prosecutions. As a result, we're upgrading more felony domestic violence cases than ever before, and we are providing our victims with more timely and effective service. And I have more good news when it comes to domestic violence prosecution. Just 2 weeks ago, my office was notified by the U.S. Department of Justice that we have been awarded a $1 million grant to expand our highly successful Target Abuser Call program. For those who may not be familiar with Target Abuser Call, that particular program takes a more intense approach to prosecuting the most serious domestic violence cases. We have two dedicated, as we call them, TAC teams, which are made up of an assistant state's attorney, a state's attorney investigator, and a victim witness employee. And the entire team handles victims' cases, again, from start to finish, vertical prosecution. The TAC program was created here in Cook County in 1997 by my predecessor, Dick Devine, who accomplished so many great things during his tenure in this office, particularly in the areas of domestic violence and juvenile justice. The TAC program has been highly successful. In fact, this program has been singled out as a promising practice by the U.S. Justice Department's Office of Violence Against Women. As a result, it has been used as a model for other programs throughout the nation. With this new grant, we will be adding an additional TAC team to Domestic Violence Court, which will enable us to immediately expand and enhance our ability to serve the victims of this crime. As you can see, there has been tremendous progress in many different areas within the Cook County State's Attorney's Office. I'm hopeful that the residual effects of this progress will continue to reach and touch all of the citizens who are in need of our services here in Cook County. I know for certain these accomplishments would not have been possible without the hard work of all the men and women of our office. I want to thank all the employees of the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, some who are here today, who are truly dedicated and committed to public service. And as I close, I'd like to share my very personal experience from the past year that has great meaning for me on many, many levels. Last June, I became the first sitting Cook County State's Attorney to become president of the Chicago Bar Association. I've been a member of the CBA for many, many years, and it's been a position that I was working towards before the election came about. It's a great privilege, and I'm very proud of that achievement. Some of you may know that the headquarters for the CBA is located in the South Loop on Plymouth Court. Ironically, the CBA is located right next door to the old Binion's restaurant. It's the same restaurant where my dad worked as a waiter when I was a young girl. For many years, every time I went over to the CBA to attend a meeting, I always thought about my dad, who passed away when I was only 12. Still today, I can remember the time as a child when my dad became the head waiter at Binion's, and it was such a proud moment for him, for my parents, and for the entire family. So I'm sure that when he worked at Binion's, he never knew or never thought that his youngest daughter would somehow become a lawyer. And I'm sure that he served some of the judges and lawyers from the Chicago Bar Association, and lawyers whom I eventually probably have met during my years at the CBA. So I'm sure that he's very proud of me, as is my mom as well. And before we started here today, Jay Doherty said to me, "Anita, can you please tell the nun story?" And I said, "Well, you know, it really doesn't fit into my remarks. I don't know if you really want me." He's like, "Oh, but I love that story. You got to tell it." So I promised Jay that I would retell the nun story, and I know there are people in this room that have heard it before, but I know there are people that haven't. And I tell this story, and it's all true, nothing's made up. But as a young kid growing up in Pilsen, it was very important for my mom and my dad to send me to Catholic schools. However, he was a waiter. She didn't work outside the home, and finances were tight, so it was tough. It was a struggle. And people have asked me, well, how did your parents afford it? How could they send you to school? And I said, well, grammar school, it kind of became like the barter system, because once the nuns discovered that Mrs. Alvarez could sew, they had all kinds of plans and ideas. And it was at the time, and those of us who are old enough to remember, when the nuns were still in their old habits, and they were now beginning to change to more modern dress. And so when they discovered that my mom could sew, she got the call to go to the convent because they wanted her to take the material from the old habits and create modern dresses for them. And there's a lot of material in those old habits, let me tell you. So I must have been maybe in first grade, And I go with my mom to the convent, and we're sitting there, and there's this nun in full habit, and she begins to undress, and she takes off the first layer, second layer, and I don't know how many layers, but there were many, many layers, and she got down to her slip, and I sat there. I must have turned as red as your jacket over there. I was so embarrassed, and I immediately began, in my mind, to recite rapid-fire Hail Marys because I had no idea what sin it was. But there was a sin. There had to be a sin. There had to be a sin. I'm sitting there looking at a nun in her slip. And she leaned over, tapped me on the head, and she said, "It'll be okay. It's okay. It's okay." And my mom, of course, proceeded to take all that material and recreate dresses. And that's kind of how I got through grammar school, because she would do some sewing, and they'd knock off this month's tuition, or they'd give us a little discount, and so that's kind of how I got through. But I know it was a great education, and I'm standing here before you because of it. So I can't forget where I came from. I can't forget what got me here. So I want to thank all of you for taking your time here today, for listening to me. Jay, I got it in. All right. Are there questions or?
Yes.
Oh.
Anita, why don't you take a little breath, take a sip of water. Folks, on your tables, there's some pieces of paper. If you have some questions that you would like the state's attorney to address, please fill them out. We have some people who will come around and pick them up. You're being very modest in talking about those nuns and that, because you are in a Hall of Fame. You know, you're one of the 4 women, along with Paul Green's wife Sharon, Alderman Burke's wife Ann, of the Maria Hall of Fame. So let's give the state's attorney. And I hope this won't offend any followers of that team up on the north side that hasn't accomplished anything since 1908. But she is a true White Sox fan. Thanks, John. I was at a game this summer and wandered out to visit the statue of Nellie Fox out there in center field, and there was the state's attorney with about 10, I assume, attorneys from the office. They were engaged in a seminar discussing the finer points of baseball. And we all know that she did a fantastic job in throwing out the first pitch at one of the White Sox games.
Actually, I was quite embarrassed by my pitch because I had practiced and practiced and practiced. And my youngest son said, "Mom, if you bounce that in, you're just going to embarrass us." So of course, I bounced it in. And after he said to me, "I can't believe you just did that in front of all these people." But my older son got it right, because he said, "Mom, that was kind of cub-like of you. You choked."
Okay. Thank you, Anita. So we'll have our staff go around and pick up some questions. I see there's one in the back of the room there. But here's a question from Cheryl, who's sitting over here. She's from the Barrio Foundation. And her question is, what types of intervention programs do you see that effectively address the gang violence and drug problem in our communities?
Well, at the juvenile level, our whole concept of juvenile court is under the theory of balance and restorative justice, and that is really to get these kids not in the courtroom and not within the system, but to get them the help that they need and get them in the appropriate program. We've seen a great success with that, with the balance and restorative justice concept. We've actually reduced the number of cases going into the system from 22,000 to 8. So it is working at that juvenile level. Now, once we get to the adult level, can I stand up here and say there's a perfect program working? No, there isn't. But I think what's important is that, that the education of our young kids, how important it is to stress that. And those of us who are professionals, I think we have a duty to be a mentor, to go back, to get these kids and be role models for them, so they know that there is a way out, and there is a way that we can get out of this particular situation. So I think at the juvenile level, yes, we've seen success with our programs. The adult level is something we'll continue to work on.
Thank you. This is from Richard Streetman. Where are you at, Richard? Way in the back, okay. How has your gender and/or ethnicity informed your career in the Cook County State's Attorney's Office?
How is it formed?
Informed. How has it affected?
I think, as I mentioned earlier, a gang case when, as any minority prosecutor will tell you, they're going to get to ask that question at some point within their career. But I think what's important is that, as a woman, as a minority, that we are out there making sure that the victims see us, that we are there, and that we understand their concerns and where they're from. I think at the beginning of my career, there were less women in the office. Now women outnumber the men. It's 54% women in the state's attorney's office now. We're taking over the world, Richard. And so things have changed. Things have changed. I think, there was times when I was asked if I was the Spanish interpreter out at Branch 50 instead of the state's attorney. So it has changed. And I think women in total legal profession, we're seeing them as partners in big firms. And I think we do bring a different perspective to the office and to handling these cases. And again, as a minority, I think that it's important for us as minority attorneys, again, to encourage the kids coming up behind us to take positions such as positions in the state's attorney's office or the public defender's office, in public servant. And I think it's important to be that role model.
Thank you. This is from Bill Seath, who's a City Club member with Total Environmental Solutions. Bill, where are you? Over there, in that right-hand corner. This is about the RICO, not Edward G. Robinson, the RICO legislation. Have you approached the Attorney General about supporting your efforts? If so, what was her reaction? If not, why not?
That particular bill was something that we worked on very hard and introduced. I believe that we collaborate a lot with the AG's office on different bills. This one was ours alone, so they didn't have a part of it. They certainly weren't opposed to it, but it really was something that was a big initiative of ours. But we have worked with the AG's office on a lot of different things. I know the Attorney General had a lot of legislative matters down there that they were pushing, and we continue to work together. We will work together, but this wasn't anything that I'm aware of her opposing in any way. It just was our initiative.
Okay, State's Attorney Alvarez, this is a Springfield type question. What are some of the forces other than the gun lobby that you wrestle with in Springfield and the legislature that have prevented some of the bills that you would like to see passed from being passed?
Well, I think explaining to everyone down in Springfield how important these measures are. For instance, on the gun bills, I went down to testify on one, and I can tell you, sitting next to an NRA person who attacked me immediately, there is, the rest of the state doesn't quite see things the same as we see up here in Chicago, and I don't mean that with any disrespect, but the reality is we live in this big urban environment, and we see the crime, we see the horrific effects of gun violence that perhaps the remainder of the state doesn't see. So I think particularly in the gun cases, we're not always going to see eye to eye with the rest of the legislators, but I think what's important is that we make our case when we do go down there to explain to them how important these things are going to be. The RICO statute, again, was disappointing that we couldn't, I guess, get it passed, but we couldn't, I guess, get our point across that this particular bill would help us in so many ways, not just the corruption angle of it, but also on the gang conspiracy cases. So I guess it's educating down in Springfield to let them know exactly how this affects all of us within the entire state, not just here in Chicago. So I think there's a lot of, I've only been down there 3 times. I'll be honest, I don't like going down there, but I will continue to go down there. in order to push for pieces of legislation that I think are quite important for all of us.
Okay, well, we're sorry to hear that you don't like going down I-55 to the patch to Springfield, but we have Senator Art Berman in attendance here, Mr. Education, so if you want to get some tips on what to do in Springfield and where to go. Art, would you help the state's attorney out?
Be my pleasure.
Okay. We have a few more questions here. How does one balance being state's attorney, wife, mom, and still have time to go to a White Sox game?
Because I bring my kids with me. And so, you know, as a woman, we all know how we multitask. So you're able to do everything all at once. It's crazy, hectic, my life. Nothing's perfect. I don't think that you ever achieve a real balance on it, you know, perfect balance, I should say. But if there are ways to get the family involved and still able to do things, you know, I've taken my kids to parades with me and things like that they didn't do before. But obviously the most important role I have in life is being a mom. So, and I am proud to say that 3 out of my 4 children are White Sox fans. 1 has declared herself a Cub fan. But I am very proud that 3 out of 4 are Sox fans.
It happens in the best of families. Another question that we received was, someone wanted to know, how do you go about recruiting young ASAs? And are the attorneys in the state's attorney's office, are they unionized because the public defenders are?
The state's attorneys are not unionized. Yes, the public defenders are, but the state's attorneys are not. And we recruit basically right out of law school. We have so many young law students who come and volunteer for our office so they get a taste of what we do. We created several years ago what we call the Prosecutors Academy. It's a summer program for young law students, and they work the summer with us. They have to write a brief, an appellate brief, but they also get to work in the courtrooms all over this particular office. So I think there's great opportunities for law students to get involved in the office and see what we do. We also have our director of hiring who goes out and recruits. We focus on the large minority law schools across the nation to increase people to come here into Chicago. And it's, so we have a great effort. And I can tell you though, every year we have hundreds and hundreds of people that we interview for what now, every year it's dwindling as to how many offers we can make. So we have a long wait list. There's never a shortage of people who want to come to our office, and it's a great place to be. We're just hoping the economy turns around so we can hire the class that we think we need.
Thank you. And we have time for one last question. State's Attorney Alvarez, 23 years in the office. You prosecuted many, many cases, including many high-profile cases. Could you ever see a case come up where you would leave your position as administrator or manager and go in and argue on behalf of the state?
Yes, I've decided to personally handle Officer Valadez's murder case. We have 3 offenders charged in that particular case, and I will be trying that with one of our senior level supervisors, Frank Merrick. It's a really, obviously, a very sad situation. This young officer whose life was cut short. But I love being in the courtroom. I love trying cases, and that's the case that I will be handling.
We have several items that we'd like to present to the state's attorney. One is a honorary membership in the City Club for 1 year. If you agree to come back again next year, we may continue this. If not, you're going to be done $50. Secondly, City Club month. And last but not least, the history of the City Club. So everybody, let's give State's Attorney Alvarez a good round of applause. And don't forget, next Monday we have our next luncheon. Take care.